The rope burned through Yates Emerson's calloused palms as the black stallion reared against the sky, hooves slashing the air like twin scythes, and for the first time in his 30 years of wrestling wild things from these California mountains, he wondered if maybe this particular beast was beyond even his considerable strength to tame. The year was 1878, and Knight's Ferry hummed with the fading gold rush energy that still drew fortune seekers to California's dusty valleys. Yates had come down from his mountain cabin 3 days prior, drawn by whispers in the mining camps about a horse that had killed 2 men who tried to catch it. The stallion ran wild in the grasslands between the Stanislaus River and the foothills, a creature of pure midnight with eyes that reflected starlight and a spirit that refused every rope, every corral, every attempted breaking. Men spoke of it in hushed tones around campfires, and Yates had listened with the quiet intensity that marked everything he did. He was not a man who spoke much or sought company often. 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle built from hauling timber and wrestling bears from his traps, Yates had shoulders broad enough to carry an elk carcass down a mountain trail without stopping. His dark hair fell past his collar, usually tied back with a strip of leather, and his face bore the weathered bronze of endless days under an unforgiving sun. His hands could crush river stones but moved with surprising gentleness when he worked with frightened animals. That gentleness was what set him apart from the other men who broke horses in the valley. He understood fear. He understood wildness. He never sought to destroy either, only to channel them. The stallion screamed, a sound that echoed off the granite cliffs surrounding the meadow. Yates planted his boots in the earth and gave the rope enough slack to keep from being dragged, but not enough to let the horse gain full freedom. Sweat poured down his spine despite the cool morning air. His arms trembled with the strain of holding 1,000 pounds of fury at bay. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the thundering hooves. "Easy, boy." The horse's eyes rolled white with panic and rage. Its coat gleamed like polished obsidian, unmarked by any brand or blemish. This was an animal that had never known human touch, never felt the weight of a saddle, never submitted to anything but its own wild nature. Yates respected that, admired it even. But he had made a promise to himself and to someone else, and Yates Emerson was not a man who broke his word. 3 weeks earlier, he had been in Knight's Ferry buying supplies when he first saw Zelda Gallagher. She stood outside her father's mercantile, struggling with the delivery of flour sacks that the freight wagon had dumped unceremoniously on the boardwalk. Her auburn hair caught the afternoon light like burnished copper, and something about the determined set of her jaw as she hefted a 50-pound sack made him stop in his tracks. She was perhaps 22 or 23, with fair skin that still held a hint of summer freckles and eyes the color of creek water over river stones, that particular shade of green that changed with the light. Yates had walked over without thinking, lifted 2 sacks under each arm as though they weighed nothing, and carried them inside. Zelda had stared at him with those changeable eyes, surprise and gratitude mixing on her face. "Thank you," she said, brushing flour dust from her practical brown dress. "My father usually handles the heavy deliveries, but he's been poorly lately." Yates nodded, uncomfortable with her direct gaze. Women in town made him nervous in a way that grizzly bears never did. He knew what to expect from a bear. Women remain mysterious, their thoughts and feelings opaque to a man who spent most of his time alone in the wilderness. "Happy to help, miss." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave. "Wait." Her voice stopped him. "I have not seen you around Knight's Ferry before. Are you passing through?" "Got a cabin up in the high country," he said. "Come down for supplies sometimes. You are the mountain man." Recognition dawned in her expression. "People talk about you. They say you can track anything, hunt anything, tame anything wild." Yates shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the reputation that had somehow grown around him. "I just live quiet and mind my business." "They say you wrestled a mountain lion once with your bare hands." "Was more of an accident than wrestling," he admitted. "Came around a boulder face to face. Did not give either of us much choice." A smile played at the corners of her mouth, the first genuine warmth he had seen in her expression. "Still, that takes remarkable courage or remarkable foolishness. Might be both." The words came out before he could stop them, and he was surprised to see her smile widen. "I am Zelda Gallagher," she said, extending her hand in a gesture that seemed both formal and friendly. His hand swallowed hers, calloused palm against smooth skin. "Yates Emerson." "Well, Yates Emerson, I am grateful for your help. If you are ever in need of supplies, please come by. I will make sure you get fair prices." He had nodded and left, but her face stayed with him on the long ride back to his cabin. Those green eyes, that determined jaw, the way she had not flinched or recoiled from his size or his rough appearance. Most town women treated him like something dangerous that might spook at any moment. Zelda had looked at him like he was simply another person. Over the following weeks he found excuses to come down from the mountain more often than strictly necessary. He told himself it was practical, that he needed the social contact, that winter was coming and he should stock up. But each time, he found his way to the mercantile, and each time Zelda would greet him with that warm smile that made something in his chest tighten. They talked while she measured out his supplies. She told him about growing up in Knight's Ferry, about how her mother had died of fever when Zelda was 16, about taking over the running of the store while her father's health declined. She spoke of her love for the valley, for the wildflowers that covered the hillsides in spring, for the way the Stanislaus River sounded in the night. She had dreams, she confessed, of breeding horses, of starting a small ranch where she could raise the finest stock in California. "Horses have always fascinated me," she said one afternoon as she wrapped his purchases in brown paper. "The way they move, their spirit, their loyalty. I think if I could work with horses every day, I would be truly happy." Yates had listened with growing understanding. This woman with her practical dresses and capable hands harbored the same wildness he saw in untamed things. She just channeled it differently. "You know much about horses?" he asked. "I read everything I can find. I have studied bloodlines, training methods, breeding programs. I know the theory." She laughed, but there was frustration in the sound. "But theory does not amount to much without practice, and my father needs me here. Besides, fine horses cost money we do not have." That night, sitting by his fire with his hound dog sleeping at his feet, Yates made his decision. He would catch the Black Stallion, the wildest, finest horse in the valley. And he would bring it to her. A gift that words could never match, something that spoke to the dreams she harbored in her heart. Now, 3 days into the attempt, with his body pushed to its limits and the rope cutting grooves in his palms despite his calluses, he wondered if he had been a fool. The stallion fought him with unrelenting fury. Yates had managed to get the rope around its neck on the first day, but since then, the battle had been constant. He gave the horse enough lead to graze and water, but never released it. He slept in shifts, always with the rope tied around his waist. The stallion tested him constantly, lunging unexpectedly, trying to drag him, trying to trample him when he dozed. But Yates was patient. Patient in the way that mountains are patient, in the way that rivers are patient as they carve through stone. He spoke to the horse constantly, his low voice maintaining a steady stream of calm sounds. He did not try to approach or touch the animal. He simply existed in its space, a presence that would not leave, would not attack, would not harm. On the 4th day, something shifted. The stallion still fought the rope, but with less conviction. It watched Yates with wary intelligence rather than pure rage. When Yates moved, the horse tracked him but did not immediately bolt. "There you are," Yates murmured. "Starting to understand I am not here to hurt you." The stallion snorted, tossing its magnificent head. Yates spent that entire day simply sitting within sight of the horse, the rope loose in his hands. He ate jerky from his pack and drank from his canteen while the stallion grazed nearby, always maintaining 20 feet of distance. The sun arced across the sky. Hawks circled overhead. The world continued its eternal rhythms while man and horse existed in their strange standoff. By evening, the distance had closed to 15 feet. The stallion still startled at sudden movements, still pulled against the rope periodically, but the raw panic had faded from its eyes. Yates saw intelligence there, a fierce pride that would never be broken but might be bargained with. "You are something special," he told the horse as twilight painted the valley purple and gold. "She is going to love you." The thought of Zelda's face when she saw this magnificent creature kept him going through the 5th day. When his body screamed for rest and his hands bled through hastily wrapped bandages. The stallion allowed him to approach within 10 feet now. They had developed a rhythm, a dance of advance and retreat, trust slowly building in microscopic increments. On the 6th day, Yates woke at dawn to find the stallion standing directly over him, close enough that he could feel the animal's breath on his face. His heart hammered, but he remained perfectly still. One strike from those hooves would crush his skull. But the stallion simply studied him with dark, intelligent eyes, then moved away to graze. Yates sat up slowly, hardly daring to believe what had just happened. The horse had approached him voluntarily, had chosen proximity over distance. It was the breakthrough he had been waiting for. "Good boy," he said softly. "Good, beautiful boy." He spent that day gradually closing the distance, always moving slowly, always giving the horse space to retreat. By afternoon, he could stand next to the stallion's shoulder without causing panic. The animal's skin twitched under his proximity but did not bolt. Yates raised his hand incrementally, moving so slowly that each inch took minutes. When his palm finally rested against the horse's neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath the sleek coat, triumph surged through him. The stallion trembled but held still. Yates kept his hand there, maintaining gentle contact, feeling the horse's rapid heartbeat gradually slow. He stroked the dark neck with careful movements, murmuring constant reassurance. "You are going to change her life," he told the horse, "going to make her dreams possible. And I think you are going to love her too, because she understands wild things. She understands what it means to want freedom." That evening, he fashioned a simple halter from spare rope, working with the same infinite patience he had shown throughout the week. The stallion accepted it with only token resistance, as though understanding that this man meant no harm, only sought partnership. The walk back to Knight's Ferry took 2 full days. Yates led the stallion on foot, covering the miles at a steady pace that did not strain the tenuous bond they had formed. The horse followed, sometimes willingly, sometimes reluctantly, but always moving forward. They stopped frequently to let the animal graze and drink. Yates talked to him constantly, a running monologue about the mountains, the valley, and the woman who waited unknowingly at the end of their journey. Her eyes change color depending on the light, he found himself saying, as they walked through a meadow thick with late summer grass, and when she smiles, really smiles, it is like the sun coming out from behind clouds. She is strong too, not just physically, though she is plenty capable, strong in her spirit, the kind of strength that endures. The stallion's ears flicked back and forth, listening to his voice. "I think maybe I love her," Yates admitted to the horse, the words easier to say to an animal than they would ever be to another human. "Known her less than a month, but there it is. Feel it in my bones like I feel coming weather. She is something special, deserves something special." They spent the night under stars so bright they cast shadows, and Yates dreamed of green eyes and auburn hair. Knight's Ferry appeared in the valley below them on the morning of the second day. The small town clustered around the covered bridge that spanned the Stanislaus River, wooden buildings lining the main street in tidy rows. Smoke rose from breakfast fires. The sounds of daily life drifted up to where Yates stood with the stallion. His heart hammered against his ribs with a nervousness that had nothing to do with the unpredictable horse beside him. What if she did not want the stallion? What if she thought him presumptuous, bringing such a gift? What if he had completely misread the warmth in her eyes, the genuine pleasure she seemed to take in his visits? "Too late to turn back now," he muttered, and started down the slope toward town. People stopped and stared as he walked the black stallion down the main street. Conversations died mid-sentence. Children pointed and their mothers pulled them back against the buildings. Everyone in Knight's Ferry knew about the wild stallion. Everyone knew men had died trying to catch it. And here came Yates Emerson, the strange mountain man, walking it docilely behind him as though it were a trained carriage horse. Yates ignored the stares, his focus entirely on the mercantile at the far end of the street. His pulse pounded in his ears. His mouth had gone dry. He felt more nervous than he had facing the horse's fury, because this mattered more than anything had mattered in years. The mercantile door stood open to catch the morning breeze. Yates could see Zelda inside, reaching up to stock a high shelf. His throat tightened. He wrapped the stallion's lead rope securely around the hitching post, then paused, suddenly uncertain. Should he go inside and bring her out? Should he call to her? How did a man present such a gift? The decision was made for him when she turned and saw him through the window. Her face lit up with that smile that made his chest ache, and she hurried outside, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yates, I was wondering when you would come back down from the mountain. I was starting to think maybe you had decided to avoid civilization entirely through the winter." She stopped abruptly as she noticed the stallion. Her eyes went wide, disbelief and wonder washing across her expressive face. That cannot be?" "The wild stallion from the grasslands," Yates confirmed. His voice came out rougher than intended. "Spent the last week bringing him around. Figured you might have use for him." Zelda moved toward the horse as though in a trance, her hand extended. The stallion eyed her warily but did not pull away. When her fingers touched his neck, the horse shivered but held still. "He is magnificent," she breathed. I have never seen such lines, such presence. Yates, do you have any idea what he is worth, what you could sell him for? Do not want to sell him. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw understanding dawning in those changeable eyes. You caught him for me. It was not a question, but Yates nodded anyway. You said you wanted to breed horses, figured you needed good stock to start with. Does not get much better than this, her voice caught. I cannot possibly accept this. He is too valuable, too much, already caught him, already brought him here, would not know what else to do with him. That was not entirely true, but it was close enough. Besides, he deserves someone who will appreciate what he is, someone who understands wildness and respects it. Tears gathered in her eyes, making them appear even greener. I do not know what to say. No one has ever given me anything like this. No one has ever understood what I dream about. You deserve your dreams, Yates said simply. She moved suddenly, closing the distance between them, and rose on her toes to press a kiss to his weathered cheek. The touch burned through him like lightning, every nerve suddenly alive and aware. She smelled like lavender and flower and something uniquely herself. Thank you, she whispered against skin. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me. Yates stood frozen, hardly breathing as she pulled back. Her cheeks had flushed pink, and she seemed suddenly uncertain, as though surprised by her own boldness. I should, he gestured vaguely toward the stallion, should help you get him settled somewhere. You got a place to keep him? Old Hernandez has some empty stalls behind his livery. He has been trying to court me for months, bringing flowers and cheap compliments. Maybe this will finally convince him I am not interested. She laughed, the sound slightly shaky. Come on, let us get this beautiful boy somewhere he can rest properly. They walked together through town, leading the stallion between them. Yates was hyper-aware of her presence beside him, of the occasional brush of her arm against his, of the way her hair caught the sunlight. The world felt different suddenly, sharper and more vivid, as though he had been seeing it through clouded glass, and someone had finally cleaned the pane. Hernandez proved surprisingly agreeable to renting Zelda his largest stall once she explained the situation. The older man looked between Yates and Zelda with knowing eyes, but kept his commentary to himself beyond a muttered, "Takes a special kind of fool to give away a horse like that," which might have been insult or compliment or both. They settled the stallion in his new quarters with fresh hay and water. The horse explored the stall with cautious curiosity, clearly unused to walls and roofs, but calm enough under Yates's steady presence. What will you call him? Yates asked as they stood watching the horse. Shadow, Zelda said immediately, because he moves like darkness, like something you cannot quite catch, and because he came from the wild places where shadows run deep. She looked at Yates. Will you help me gentle him properly? I know theory, but you have the practical knowledge, and he trusts you. Be happy to. The words came easily, naturally. Might take some time, though. Need to build on what we started. I have time. She smiled at him, and there was something in that smile that spoke of more than horses and training, all the time needed. Over the following weeks, Yates found himself in Knight's Ferry more than he had ever been anywhere. He came down from his mountain cabin daily, arriving at the livery at dawn to work with Shadow while the world was still quiet. Zelda met him there every morning, and together they continued the patient work of building the stallion's trust and acceptance. She learned quickly, picking up the subtle cues and signals that Yates had spent years mastering. She moved with quiet confidence around the horse, never rushing, never forcing. Shadow responded to her with growing affection, nuzzling at her pockets for the apple pieces she always carried, allowing her to groom him without resistance. But more than the horse training, those morning hours became precious for the time they gave Yates and Zelda together. They talked while they worked, their conversations ranging across every conceivable topic. She told him about books she had read, theories of horse breeding she wanted to test, memories of her mother teaching her to bake bread. He shared stories of the mountains, of tracking wolves through snow, of the profound silence that came with true wilderness. Do you ever get lonely up there? She asked one morning as she brushed Shadow's gleaming coat. All by yourself with just the trees and animals? Yates considered the question carefully. Used to think I preferred it that way. People can be complicated, hard to understand. Animals are straightforward. You treat them right, they respond accordingly. But, she prompted, hearing the unspoken word. But lately, been thinking maybe I have been hiding more than I have been living. He ran his hand along Shadow's back, feeling the powerful muscles beneath. Mountains are beautiful, but they do not talk back. They do not smile at you. They do not make you feel like maybe you are part of something bigger than just survival. Zelda stopped brushing, her hand still on Shadow's shoulder. Is that how you feel now? Part of something bigger? He met her eyes across the horse's broad back. Yes. The single word hung in the air between them, weighted with everything he could not quite articulate. Zelda's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. I am glad, she said softly. I have come to value our mornings together, value them more than I probably should admit. Why? Should not you admit it? Because I am a practical woman who runs a mercantile and takes care of her ailing father. Because I have responsibilities and obligations. Because I am not some silly girl who can afford to lose her head over a mountain man who might disappear back into the wilderness at any moment. She said it all in a rush, as though the words had been building pressure for weeks. Yates moved around Shadow's head until he stood directly in front of her. This close, he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could count the freckles across her nose. I am not planning on disappearing, he said. I am planning on staying right here for as long as you will tolerate my presence. Tolerate? She laughed, but there were tears in her eyes again. Yates, you have given me the finest horse in California. You have spent every day for weeks helping me learn to work with him. You listen when I talk and remember details and treat me like I have a brain in my head instead of just a pretty face. Tolerate is not the word I would use. What word would you use? She bit her lip, suddenly shy despite her bold words. Treasure, cherish, need. His heart threatened to break free from his chest. He raised his hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his rough palm. She leaned into the touch, her eyes drifting closed. Been wanting to kiss you since the day I first saw you wrestling those flour sacks, he admitted. But I am not good with words or courting. Figured I would just make a mess of it. You brought me a wild stallion as a courtship gift, Zelda said, opening her eyes to look at him with unmistakable affection. I think you have been doing just fine. He bent his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away. But she rose on her toes to meet him halfway, and when their lips finally touched, the world narrowed to just that point of contact. She tasted like morning coffee and something sweet, and the small sound she made against his mouth sent fire racing through his veins. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people learning each other. But it deepened quickly, weeks of building tension finally finding release. Yates wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest, and she melted into him with a sigh that spoke of relief and homecoming. Shadow snorted loudly, breaking the moment. They pulled apart, laughing breathlessly, foreheads resting together. Even the horse wants attention, Zelda said. Smart horse. Knows a good thing when he sees it. Yates brushed a strand of hair from her face. Zelda, I am not smooth or sophisticated. I live rough and simple, but I am steady and I keep my word, and I would count it the highest honor of my life if you would let me court you properly. Properly? She smiled up at him. What does that look like for a mountain man? Sunday dinners with your father, I suppose. Walking you home in the evenings, maybe taking you up to see my cabin so you know where I live and how I live. Doing this the right way. He paused. Though I am going to warn you now, I am not going anywhere. Once I set my mind on something, I am about as movable as granite. Good, she said firmly. Because I have set my mind on you, Yates Emerson, and I am every bit as stubborn as you are. He kissed her again, softer this time, savoring the feel of her in his arms. Shadow watched them with dark, patient eyes, and Yates sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever providence had led him to chase a wild horse down from the hills. The following months unfolded like a dream Yates had never dared to have. He moved between mountain and town with new purpose, his solitary life gradually weaving together with Zelda's. She brought order and warmth to his rough existence, while he represented freedom and possibility to her duty-bound life. He met her father properly, a dignified man in his late 50s, worn down by illness but still sharp-minded. Patrick Gallagher studied Yates with the assessing eye of someone who had judged character for decades. You are the one who gave my daughter that horse, he said without preamble when Yates came for Sunday dinner. Yes, sir. That was either a very generous gesture or a very calculating one. Just wanted to help her with her dreams, Yates said honestly. Patrick nodded slowly. She talks about you constantly. Yates said this, Yates did that. I have not seen her this happy since before her mother died. You planning on breaking her heart? Rather cut off my own arm, sir. Good answer. Patrick gestured to the dinner table. Sit down. Let us see if you can handle my daughter's cooking. She is fine at many things, but baking has never been her strong suit. Zelda appeared from the kitchen carrying a roast that looked surprisingly appetizing, and she swatted her father's shoulder affectionately. "Stop trying to scare him off. I saw you nosing around that pie I made yesterday." Dinner was warm and full of laughter, easier than Yates had imagined possible. Patrick told stories about the early days of Knight's Ferry, about finding gold in the river, about building the town from nothing. Zelda chimed in with her own memories, and gradually, Yates found himself sharing stories from his own past. Growing up in Missouri, coming west as a teenager after his parents died, learning to survive in the mountains through trial and error and the occasional kindness of trappers who took pity on a green boy. "You have built a good life," Patrick said as the evening wound down. "A hard life, but an honest one. I respect that." Later, as Yates walked Zelda back from seeing her father to bed, she squeezed his arm. "He likes you, I can tell. He would not have shared his good whiskey with you otherwise. I like him too. He is a good man, raised a remarkable daughter. I worry about him," she admitted. "Some days he seems stronger, but other days he can barely get out of bed. I do not know how much longer." Her voice trailed off. Yates pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Whatever comes, you will not face it alone. I am here." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "That means more than you know." Winter came to the valley with cold rains that turned the streets to mud and kept most people indoors. But Yates and Zelda continued their morning routine with Shadow, working now on saddle training and basic commands. The stallion had gentled considerably but retained his proud spirit. He would never be a docile mount, but he was becoming a partner, something far more valuable. "He is ready," Zelda said, one morning in early December. Snow dusted the hills around Knight's Ferry, and their breath formed clouds in the cold air. "Ready for me to ride him?" Yates felt a spike of concern. Shadow was calm but still powerful and unpredictable. "You sure? Could wait a bit longer." "I am sure." She looked at him with determination. "Trust is a two-way thing. He has trusted us with his freedom. I need to trust him with my safety." They prepared carefully, Yates checking every strap and buckle twice. Shadow stood patiently for the saddle, though his skin twitched and his ears flicked nervously. When everything was secure, Zelda approached the horse's left side. "Easy, beautiful boy," she murmured, stroking his neck. "We are going to do this together." She put her foot in the stirrup, and Yates stood ready to intervene if needed. Zelda swung herself up with practiced grace, settling gently into the saddle. Shadow danced sideways, clearly startled by the unaccustomed weight, but Zelda kept her seat easily, her hands light on the reins, her voice steady and reassuring. "Good boy, Shadow. Good, brave boy." The stallion calmed under her words and touch. After a few minutes of standing still, she asked him to walk with the gentlest pressure of her heels. He moved forward hesitantly, every muscle tense. They made one slow circuit of the corral while Yates watched with his heart in his throat. When they completed the circle, Zelda dismounted with flushed cheeks and shining eyes. Did you see? Did you see how perfect he was?" Yates pulled her into a fierce hug, relief and pride mingling. "Saw you both. You are a natural rider. Your mother would be proud." She kissed him there in the corral with Shadow watching, and Yates thought his chest might burst from the fullness of the feeling inside it. Christmas came quietly. Yates carved Zelda a small wooden box with a horse running across the lid, spending hours by firelight getting every detail perfect. She gave him a heavy wool coat she had sewn herself, lined with sheepskin for warmth. They exchanged gifts in the mercantile after closing, and the kiss she gave him lasted until they were both breathless and laughing. "I love you," she said suddenly, the words spilling out unplanned. "I have been trying not to say it because it seemed too soon, too much, but I cannot keep pretending I feel anything less." "I love you too," Yates replied, the words easier than he expected. "Have for months now. Did not think someone like you could ever love someone like me, someone like you." She framed his face with her hands. "You mean someone brave and gentle and patient? Someone who listens and protects and sees people for who they really are?" "Yates, you are everything I never knew I needed." He kissed her again, pouring all his feeling into the contact, because words would never be enough to express what he felt. Patrick's health declined sharply after Christmas. By January, he was bedridden more often than not, and Zelda spent her days torn between running the mercantile and caring for her father. Yates helped however he could, managing the store when she needed to be with Patrick, sitting quietly in the sick room when she needed someone to share the vigil. "Thank you for being here," Patrick told Yates one evening when Zelda had gone to make tea. His voice was weak but clear. "I worried about leaving her alone, but I see now she will not be alone." I will take care of her, Yates promised. For as long as she will let me make it official, Patrick said. Marry her, give her a family. She deserves happiness, and God knows she has earned it after taking care of me all these years. Planning on it, sir, soon as the time is right. Patrick smiled faintly. Time is never right. Life happens whether we are ready or not. Ask her soon, Yates. Make an old man happy before he goes. 2 weeks later, on a cold February morning, Patrick Gallagher passed away peacefully in his sleep. Zelda woke to find him gone. His face relaxed into an expression of peace he had not worn in months. She held together through the funeral, through the well-wishers and the condolences, through the business of death that demanded attention. But when it was finally over, and they stood alone in the mercantile that now belonged solely to her, she broke. Yates held her while she sobbed, great wrenching cries that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. He did not try to quiet her or tell her everything would be fine. He just held her and let her grieve, his strength a solid anchor in the storm of her loss. He was all I had left, she said when she could finally speak. My last family? No, Yates said gently. You have me. If you want me, you have me. She looked up at him with swollen, red-rimmed eyes. Do I, really? You are not going to get tired of town life and disappear back into your mountains? The mountains will always be there. But you are here, and that makes here the only place I want to be. He wiped tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. Marry me, Zelda. Let me be your family. Let me give you the home and love you deserve. You are proposing to me at my father's funeral. She laughed, but it was a broken sound. Your father told me to ask you soon. Said life happens whether we are ready or not. Yates pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. He had bought it weeks ago with money from selling furs, waiting for the right moment. Maybe this was not the right moment, but it was the necessary one. This is not fancy, and I am not making some pretty speech. I am just a man who loves you more than anything and wants to spend every day of the rest of his life making sure you know it. Zelda stared at the ring, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, God help me, yes, I need you, Yates. I need something good and solid and real. He slipped the ring onto her finger and held her close. And they stood together in the quiet mercantile while the winter wind rattled the windows. They married quietly in March at the small church in Knight's Ferry. There were no fancy decorations or elaborate celebrations, just a simple ceremony with a handful of friends as witnesses. Zelda wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slender frame. Yates wore new clothes bought specially for the occasion, uncomfortable in the stiff collar but willing to endure it for her. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her with a tenderness that belied his rough appearance. She was his now, officially and completely, and he was hers. The enormity of it settled over him like a blanket, warm and right. They spent their wedding night in Yates's cabin high in the mountains. He had spent weeks preparing it, building a proper bed frame, installing glass windows, making it more home than shelter. Zelda stood in the doorway looking around with wonder. It is beautiful, she said. So peaceful. It is yours now, Yates told her. Everything I have is yours. She turned to him with eyes that held both nervousness and anticipation. I have never. I do not. We have all the time in the world, he said gently. No rush, no pressure. But she moved to him, rising on her toes to kiss him. I want this, want you. Just be patient with me. He was patient, infinitely so, guiding her through the newness with gentle hands and whispered reassurances. When they finally came together as husband and wife, it was with a tenderness that made the act sacred. She clung to him, and he held her as though she was precious and breakable, though he knew she was neither. She was strong, but strength did not mean she could not be cherished. Afterward, lying tangled together under thick quilts, Zelda traced the scars on his chest with gentle fingers. Tell me about this one, she said, touching a long mark along his ribs. Grizzly, 5 years back. Got between her and her cubs without realizing it. She took exception. And this? Another scar on his shoulder. Fell down a ravine in the dark, landed on a broken tree branch. You have lived such a dangerous life. Worth it, he said, because it led me here, led me to you. She kissed him again, and they made love a second time. Slower and deeper, learning each other's bodies and responses. When sleep finally claimed them, they were wrapped so tightly together it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. They established a rhythm to their married life. During the week, they stayed in town. Zelda ran the mercantile with Yates's help, and they continued Shadow's training. The Stallion had become something of a celebrity in Knight's Ferry. People came from neighboring towns to see the wild horse that had been tamed by the mountain man and his bride. Some offered absurd amounts of money to buy him, but Zelda refused every offer. "He is not for sale," she told them firmly. "He is family." On weekends they rode up to the mountain cabin, taking Shadow and one of the horses from the livery stable. Those days in the high country became precious escapes from the demands of town life. They hunted and fished and made love under open skies. Zelda learned to track game and read weather signs. Yates learned to appreciate stillness in conversation and the joy of sharing experiences with someone who mattered. Spring bloomed into summer. Zelda proved to have a gift for horse breeding and training. Word spread about her skills, and people began bringing their difficult horses to her. She worked with each animal patiently, applying the principles Yates had taught her, and achieved remarkable results. Money began flowing into their accounts, more than the mercantile had ever generated. "We could do this full-time," she said one evening as they reviewed their finances. "Sell the mercantile and focus entirely on horses. With Shadow as our stud and the reputation we are building, we could have a real ranch within a few years." "Is that what you want?" Yates asked. "More than anything, is it what you want?" he considered. The mercantile represented security, predictability. A ranch would be hard work and uncertainty. But he looked at his wife's shining eyes and knew the answer. "Let us do it." They sold the mercantile that fall to a young couple newly arrived from San Francisco. With the proceeds and their savings, they bought land along the Stanislaus River, 50 acres of grassland with good water and shelter. By winter, they had built a small barn and started work on a house. Yates had spent years building shelters in the wilderness, but constructing a proper home was different. He wanted everything perfect for Zelda. The walls had to be straight, the roof watertight, the floors level. He worked from dawn to dusk, and Zelda worked beside him, hammering nails and sawing boards with determined focus. By Christmas, they moved into the completed house. It was modest by town standards, but to them it was a palace. 2 rooms downstairs, a sleeping loft upstairs, a real stone fireplace, and glass windows that let in the light. They furnished it slowly with pieces bought in town and items Yates crafted himself. On Christmas morning, Zelda gave him news that made every moment of struggle worthwhile. "I am going to have a baby," she said, her hand resting on her still flat belly. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday." Yates pulled her into his arms so fiercely she gasped. "A baby? We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy?" He laughed, the sound rough with emotion. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful and a dozen other things I do not have words for. Yes, I am happy. More than I knew was possible." The pregnancy progressed without complications. Zelda bloomed with it, her skin glowing, her movements taking on a new deliberate grace. Yates became impossibly protective, hovering whenever she did anything remotely strenuous, driving her to laughing exasperation. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him after he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "Women have been doing this since the dawn of time." "Not my woman and my baby," he countered. "Let me worry. It is all I can do." She softened, pulling him down for a kiss. "I love that you worry. I love that you care. Just remember, I am still capable. I know you are capable. You are the strongest person I have ever met. But let me help anyway." Their son was born on a warm August evening in 1879, arriving with healthy lungs and a full head of dark hair. Yates held the tiny, red-faced creature with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the fierce wave of love and protectiveness that crashed over him. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect. We need to name him," Zelda said from the bed, exhausted but smiling. They had discussed names for months without agreeing. But looking at his son's small face, Yates knew what felt right. "Patrick," he said. "After your father." Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks. "Patrick Emerson, yes, Dad would have loved that." Little Patrick proved to be a healthy, happy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's sturdy build. He grew quickly, hitting milestones early, always eager to explore and discover. Yates had never imagined fatherhood would feel like this, so consuming and fulfilling simultaneously. The ranch prospered. Shadow proved to be an excellent stud, passing on his intelligence and spirit to his offspring. Zelda's reputation as a trainer spread throughout California. They hired help as needed, but kept the operation small and personal. Yates continued to take hunting trips into the mountains occasionally, but never for more than a few days. Home pulled at him now in a way the wilderness never had. When Patrick was 2, Zelda became pregnant again. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1882, a tiny thing with auburn hair and her father's serious expression. They named her Rose, after Zelda's mother. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family and love. Patrick grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to track and hunt and gentle horses. Rose proved to have her mother's way with animals and her father's fearlessness. Together they filled the house with laughter and chaos and the particular sweetness of childhood. Years passed with the strange swiftness that marks happy times. Yates's hair started to show silver at the temples. Zelda developed fine lines at the corners of her eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But their love only deepened, weathering the inevitable conflicts and challenges that come with building a life together. "Do you ever miss your mountain?" Zelda asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were finally asleep, and the evening was theirs alone. "Sometimes," Yates admitted, "miss the solitude, the simplicity. But I would not trade this for anything. This is where I am supposed to be. With a nagging wife and 2 wild children?" She smiled. "With the family I never thought I would have. With the woman who taught me that wildness does not have to mean loneliness." He took her hand, the simple gold band on her finger now worn smooth with years. "You saved me, Zelda. I did not even know I needed saving, but you did it anyway." "You saved me right back," she replied. "Gave me dreams and courage and a partner who sees me. We saved each other." Shadow wandered over to the porch, now a mature horse but still possessing the regal bearing that had marked him from the first. He nuzzled at Zelda's hand, seeking treats, and she laughed and produced an apple from her pocket. "Spoiled creature," she told him affectionately. "You know I always have something for you." The stallion crunched his apple contentedly while the last light faded from the sky. When Patrick turned 10, Yates took him on his first extended hunting trip into the mountains. Just the two of them, father and son, spending a week in the high country. Patrick proved himself capable and willing, absorbing everything Yates taught him with serious attention. One night, sitting around their campfire, Patrick looked at his father thoughtfully. "Mom says you used to live up here alone all the time," he said. "I did. For years before I met your mother. Did not you get lonely?" Yates considered the question. "Thought I was happy. Did not know the difference between being alone and being lonely. Then I met your mother, and I understood what I had been missing. Because you fell in love? Because I found someone who made me want to be part of the world, instead of apart from it." Yates stirred the fire with a stick. "Someday you will understand. When you find your person, everything else makes sense." Patrick nodded solemnly, storing the information away. Rose grew into a wild, fearless girl who could outride most boys twice her age. She spent hours with Shadow and his offspring, developing an almost uncanny ability to communicate with horses. By the time she was 12, people were bringing their most difficult animals to her specifically, recognizing that she had inherited and exceeded her mother's gift. "She is going to be something special," Zelda said, watching Rose work with a traumatized mare that had been abused by previous owners. The girl moved with infinite patience, her voice low and soothing, and the horse responded by gradually relaxing. "Gets it from her mother," Yates replied. "Gets it from both of us." Zelda leaned against him. "We built something good here, did not we? We built something extraordinary." The years continued their steady march. Patrick grew into a strapping young man who split his time between helping on the ranch and working as a guide for city folks wanting to experience the mountains. Rose took over more of the horse training as Zelda's joints began to ache with the onset of arthritis. Yates slowed down too, though he would never admit it, his body bearing the accumulated damage of decades of hard living. They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner, just the two of them while the children handled evening chores. Zelda wore the same dress she had worn on their wedding day, altered slightly but still beautiful. Yates had bought her a new ring, a delicate band to accompany her worn wedding ring. 20 years, she marveled. It feels like yesterday and forever ago simultaneously. Best 20 years of my life, Yates said. Every day with you has been a gift. Even the days I yelled at you for tracking mud through the house, especially those days, means you cared enough to yell. He took her hand across the table. I love you more now than the day we married. Did not think that was possible, but here we are. I love you too. You have been my strength, my partner, my love. I could not have asked for a better husband or father to my children. They toasted with the good wine Yates had bought specially, and later made love with the practiced ease of long familiarity. Finding joy and connection in each other's bodies, Shadow lived to the remarkable age of 28, producing countless foals that spread his bloodline across California. When he finally passed away peacefully in his stall, the whole family mourned. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the ranch, marking his grave with a stone Yates carved himself. He changed everything, Zelda said as they stood over the grave. If you had not caught him, had not brought him to me, none of this would exist. He was always meant to be yours, Yates replied. Just took me showing up to make it happen. Patrick married at 23, bringing a sweet-faced girl named Eleanor home to the ranch. Rose showed no interest in marriage, declaring herself far too busy with horses to bother with men, though Yates suspected that would change eventually. For now, he was content to have his family around him, to watch his grandchildren toddle around the barn while Patrick and Eleanor built their own house on the far side of the property. Engines crept up slowly but inexorably. Yates's hair went fully silver. His hands, once capable of crushing stones, developed tremors on cold mornings. Zelda moved more carefully, her body protesting decades of physical work. But they adapted, finding new rhythms, accepting the limitations that came with growing old. One summer evening, when Yates was 58 and Zelda 55, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Their grandchildren played in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. Zelda rested her head on Yates's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked quietly. "Not a single one, you? Only that we do not get more time. A lifetime is not enough with you. Then we will make the most of what we have," Yates said. "Every day a gift. Every moment precious." She tilted her face up and he kissed her as the light faded and the stars emerged. Their love had begun with a wild horse and a bold gesture, grown through patience and partnership, and deepened into something that would outlast even death. Around them, their family and legacy spread like roots from a strong tree, testament to two people who found each other against impossible odds and built something lasting. The ranch continued to thrive under Patrick's management, with Rose's expertise making it the premier horse training facility in the region. More grandchildren came, filling the property with noise and laughter. Yates and Zelda settled into the role of beloved grandparents, dispensing wisdom and spoiling the children in equal measure. "We did good," Zelda said one evening as they watched their extended family gathered for Sunday dinner. "We did perfect," Yates corrected, pulling her close. They had traveled far from that day when a mountain man walked a wild stallion down the main street of Knight's Ferry. But the love that began then had only grown stronger, proving that sometimes the wildest hearts make the truest homes, and the most unexpected gifts lead to the greatest blessings. In the end, Yates thought, it was not about taming wildness but honoring it, nurturing it, and building a life that let both partners be fully themselves while creating something greater together. As the sun set over the California hills and their family laughed and talked around the dinner table, Yates Emerson knew he was the luckiest man who ever lived, not because of what he had tamed or conquered, but because of what he had found and cherished. And beside him, Zelda Gallagher Emerson knew the same, her hand clasped firmly in his, their love an anchor and a sail all at once, carrying them through every storm and calm alike, right through to the very end of their days.